Aristotle said that knowing yourself is the beginning of all wisdom. But what if you could never do that? You see, I say to you that you will never truly know yourself. And here's why. Shakespeare says, "To thine own self be true." But what if something that is true to you now is not true to you later, even though it was truly core to your character? It was you. You see, Thorfinn, the main character in Vinland Saga, is faced with this exact problem. Initially, he seeks revenge against Askeladd, the person that brutally murdered his father. As the story progresses though, Thorfinn's convictions, his core, changes and evolves after Askeladd's death. Before dying, Askeladd imparts crucial words to Thorfinn, urging him to abandon his path of vengeance and seek out his own destiny. Through those very words, he begins to understand that revenge has only brought suffering and death. He sees the futility of it all. He sees the futility of perpetuating the cycle of violence and realizes that there must be another way to live. As Thorfinn encounters new people and cultures on his journey, he is exposed to different perspectives and ideologies. He learns that there are individuals who value peace and cooperation over conflict. Thorfinn is deeply affected and enters a period of self-reflection. He realizes that his obsessions with revenge has completely consumed him. It has taken over and ravaged his body and led to countless acts of violence and bloodshed. As a result, Thorfinn abandons his pursuit of vengeance and adopts a new philosophy centered on peace and pacifism. You see, Thorfinn at the beginning of the anime thought he was meant to do that, to seek revenge. He was hell-bent on it. That was who he was, but maybe, just maybe, it was not. He did not know who he was, and he was still on that journey, that everlasting journey of self-mastery, if there even is such a thing. To think that Thorfinn's self could dedicate its whole life to vengeance and wrath and completely go in the opposite direction really shows that the self is fickle and ever-changing, that we cannot ever acquire knowledge, full knowledge of whatever or whoever we are at our core. Rodion Romanovich Raskolnikov, a former student, lives in a tiny garret on the top floor of a rundown apartment building in St. Petersburg. Raskolnikov's mother and sister are sacrificing a great deal to try to help Raskolnikov's situation. He is sickly, dressed in rags, short on money, and talks to himself. His sister even sets up to marry a wealthy man in order to help facilitate his success. Despite all this, he is also handsome, proud, and intelligent. He is contemplating committing an awful crime, but the nature of the crime is not yet clear. His pride and intellectualism leads him to disdain the rest of humanity as fit merely to perpetuate the species. In contrast, he believes that he is part of an elite Superman echelon and can consequently transgress accepted moral standards for higher purposes such as utilitarian good. He goes to another tavern where he overhears a student talking about how society would be better off if the old pawnbroker Alyona Ivanovna were dead. She was a wicked, abusive, old pawnbroker woman whom he has become aware has a lot of cash. He believes that moral decisions ought to be based on what one can determine through reason produces the highest net good on society, which is utilitarianism. Later, in the streets, Raskolnikov overhears that the pawnbroker will be alone in her apartment the next evening. He sleeps fitfully, thinking about what he should do. He thinks of himself as an individual of greatness, powerfulness, and ruthlessness, and in his mind, extraordinary men are allowed to commit crimes for the common good. His plans are now justified. Raskolnikov wakes up the next day, finds an axe, and fashions a fake item to pawn to distract the pawnbroker. That night, he goes to her apartment and kills her. While he is rummaging through her bedroom looking for money, her sister, Lizaveta, walks in, and Raskolnikov kills her as well. He barely escapes from the apartment without being seen, then returns to his apartment and collapses on his sofa. Raskolnikov finds himself tormented and riddled with guilt and horror because of his actions. He is not who he thought he was. He is not a man of ruthless power. He is a tender and emotional man. Eventually, he turns himself into the police in order to essentially avoid going absolutely insane. Raskolnikov had every reason and justification to do what he did, and yet what he did was wrong, and it causes him to feel immense pain and suffering. Just as the conscious audience and writers of who we are, or who we think we are often detached from and inconsistent with who we really are, our perception of who others are is often even further removed from the truth. For all of us, the intricate dance between our conscious mind, unconscious mind, and the world outside of ourselves is disruptive, murky, disgusting, and riddled with contradictions. And as it may seem impossible to ever truly understand, we are more closely related to those we fear or dislike than we believe. They reflect a part of us, and we reflect a part of them. Our self-understanding is not as accurate as we assume. We often pursue what we don't really desire and fear what we genuinely want. We are less logical than we think. We display a certain degree of insanity every single day, forever and for always. This just in. We're getting a quick segment break. Buddhism, quick, you're on now. There is no self. Buddhism holds that personal identity is delusional, that each of us is a self that turns out to not actually exist. Clinging to or being obsessed with the delusional self is the major cause of suffering. The Dalai Lama. Damn, this suit still got the tag on it. It's tight as hell. The old woman was a mistake perhaps, but she is not the point. The old woman was merely a sickness. I was in a hurry to step over. It wasn't a human being I killed, it was a principle. So I killed the principle, but I didn't step over. I stayed on this side. All I managed to do was kill, and I didn't even manage that, as it turns out. Raskolnikov feels anxious, not because he is a murderer, but because he is an unsuccessful murderer, unable to use the crime to his advantage and dismiss the guilt from his mind. A quote from The Pursuit of Wonder sums this up beautifully. My conclusion is that we must strive to understand ourselves not through introspection alone, but through actions and commitments. We must realize that a part of knowing ourselves means accepting that we are constantly evolving and that our understanding of ourselves will change over time. This is the journey of self-discovery, an ongoing process that never truly ends. Which means that we should be more patient with each other because every day we are still learning and experiencing in confusion just as everybody else is. And that is what connects us, the fact that we just don't know. We will never know what we want until we get it. We will never know what we have until it's gone.